And my husband promised me a peaceful retirement until I found divorce papers in his Bible. After 42 years of marriage, I found divorce papers hidden in my husband's Bible. What he didn't know was that the bookmarking ribbon sat between Proverbs 31 and the dissolution of our life together. Ironic, isn't it? The passage about a virtuous wife, followed by papers to discard one. But here's the thing about women my age. We've spent decades being underestimated. When my own children laughed at my silly little internet videos, they had no idea I was building an empire that would eventually save us all, even from their father. I still remember that Sunday morning like it was yesterday, though it's been 3 years now. Richard had gone fishing with his brother, something he'd been doing more frequently as retirement approached. We'd been planning our golden years since our 30s, the travel trailer we'd purchase, the national parks we'd visit, the grandchildren we'd spoil. Our retirement fund had grown steadily over decades of careful planning. The house was quiet that morning. Too quiet, perhaps. I'd made myself a cup of coffee and settled into Richard's reading chair by the window, something I rarely did. His Bible sat on the side table where he always left it. Richard was a deacon at our church, respected and admired by our congregation. The perfect husband, the perfect father, the perfect Christian man. At least, that's what everyone thought. I don't know what prompted me to pick up his Bible. Perhaps it was divine intervention, though it certainly didn't feel like it at the time. The leather was worn from years of use, the pages dog-eared with notes in the margins. When I opened it to where his ribbon marked his place, several folded papers slipped out onto my lap. My hands trembled as I unfolded them. Divorce papers. Already filled out. Already signed. Just waiting to be filed. 42 years of marriage reduced to legal terminology and checkboxes. The date on them was for the following month, right after our youngest daughter's wedding. The room seemed to spin. I set my coffee cup down before I dropped it. The documents listed irreconcilable differences as the reason. There was no mention of another woman, though I would later discover her name was Brenda, and she worked at his insurance office. She was 38, I was 63. What hit me hardest wasn't even the betrayal. It was the meticulous planning. He'd waited until after Amy's wedding. He'd waited until our house was paid off. He'd waited until the maximum benefit from his pension would be secured. Like our marriage had been a long-term investment with a predetermined cash-out date, the papers also detailed how our assets would be divided. The retirement fund we'd built together, split into unequal portions, with creative accounting hiding significant assets. Our home, to be sold, with him taking the lion's share for future investments. Even our shared memories had a price tag. The vintage Mustang we'd restored together would go to him, while I could keep my mother's china. I sat there for hours, reading and rereading those papers until the words blurred. By the time I heard his truck in the driveway, I'd moved from shock to grief to something else entirely. A cold, clear anger that I'd never experienced before. I slipped the papers back exactly as I'd found them. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. Something told me I needed to prepare, to protect myself in ways I'd never had to consider during 4 decades of partnership and trust. That night, as Richard snored beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I'd been a kindergarten teacher for 30 years before retiring 2 years earlier. My entire identity had been wrapped up in being Mrs. Elliott, teacher, wife, mother, grandmother. Without that, who was I? Just Eleanor? I wasn't sure I even knew anymore. The following day, while Richard was at work, I made an appointment with a lawyer, not in our town, but in the city 40 minutes away. Jennifer Lockhart was younger than my daughters, but had a reputation for being a shark in divorce proceedings. Her office was sleek and modern, nothing like the wood-paneled rooms of the lawyers Richard golfed with. "Mrs. Elliott," she said after I'd shown her the photographs I'd taken of the divorce papers, "your husband has made a critical mistake. He's showing his hand before playing his cards." "What should I do?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "First, don't let him know you found these. Second, we need to track down all your marital assets, especially the ones he might be hiding. And third," she smiled in a way that reminded me of my most determined students, "we're going to make sure you're not left with just your mother's china." I left her office with a to-do list that seemed overwhelming. Access all bank statements, photograph important documents, secure my own credit cards, create my own bank accounts. It was like preparing for a battle I never knew I'd have to fight. That evening, Richard kissed my cheek as usual when he came home. "How was your day, sweetheart?" he asked, the endearment now sounding hollow to my ears. "Oh, just the usual," I lied, thinking of the lawyer's office, the new bank account, the secret email address I'd created. "I did start a little project, though." "That's nice," he said, already reaching for the remote. He hadn't asked what the project was. He hadn't really been interested in my activities for years, I realized. As long as dinner was on the table and his shirts were ironed, I might as well have been a ghost in our home. My little project had actually started months earlier, though it had only been a hobby then. Our oldest granddaughter, Zoe, had convinced me to start posting cooking videos online. "Grandma, your apple pie recipe needs to be preserved for posterity," she'd insisted, setting up a smartphone on a tripod in my kitchen. At first, I'd done it just to humor her. I felt ridiculous talking to a phone propped against my flour canister. But Zoe had shown me how to upload the videos to something called TikTok, and to my surprise, people seemed to like them. Baking with Grandma Eleanor had attracted a modest following of a few hundred people who enjoyed my old-fashioned recipes and the stories I told while preparing them. In the days after discovering the divorce papers, I found myself turning to those videos with new purpose. The comments section had become a place where strangers said kind things about my cooking, my stories, my presence. "You remind me of my own grandmother," one comment read. "I lost her last year, and watching you bake her same recipes brings her back to me." Another said, "I never had a grandmother who cooked. Can you adopt me?" These small connections with strangers felt like lifelines as my personal world crumbled. One evening, while Richard was at another fishing trip, I decided to try something different. Instead of baking, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and talked directly to the camera. "I've been thinking about reinvention lately," I said, surprising myself with my candor. "About how we're never too old to become someone new. Someone we perhaps were always meant to be." I spoke about leaving teaching after 3 decades, about the emptiness I'd felt afterward, about searching for new purpose. I was careful not to mention Richard or the divorce papers, but I spoke honestly about feeling invisible as an older woman. "Society has a way of making women my age feel like we're past our expiration date," I said with a small laugh, but I refused to believe that. "I think we're just getting started." I uploaded the video before I could second-guess myself. By morning, it had more views than any of my baking videos. The comment section was flooded with women my age and older, sharing similar feelings. "You put into words exactly how I've been feeling. Thank you for seeing us. Please talk more about this." Something shifted in me that day. The anger and betrayal I felt toward Richard began to transform into determination. If my life was going to be upended anyway, why not rebuild it entirely on my terms? Over the next few weeks, I established a routine. During the day, I followed Jennifer's instructions, methodically documenting our assets, opening my own accounts, and preparing for the confrontation that would eventually come. In the evenings, after dinner with a husband who was increasingly absent, I recorded videos, sometimes baking, sometimes just talking about life from my perspective. My following grew steadily. 1,000, then 5,000, then 10,000 people tuned in to hear what Grandma Eleanor had to say. I found myself looking forward to these connections, to the community that was forming around my content. Our children noticed, of course. During Sunday dinner 3 weeks after finding the divorce papers, our son Michael glanced at his phone and snorted. "Mom, did you know your little baking video has 20,000 views?" he asked, his tone making it clear he found this amusing. "Is that a lot?" I asked innocently, though I checked my analytics daily by then. "It's her talking about reinvention that's getting all the attention," our daughter-in-law Samantha said, rolling her eyes slightly. "Honestly, Eleanor, it's a bit much, don't you think? All this talk about finding yourself at your age?" Richard looked up from his pot roast, frowning. "What videos?" The table fell silent. I realized he truly had no idea what I'd been doing. His disinterest in my life was so complete that he hadn't even noticed me recording videos in our own kitchen. "Mom's become an internet grandma," our youngest daughter Amy explained with an indulgent smile. "It's cute. She talks about baking and knitting and stuff. And reinvention," I added quietly. "Don't forget that part." The conversation moved on, but I noticed Richard watching me with new eyes for the rest of the evening. Later, I found him scrolling through my videos on his phone, his expression unreadable. "This is what you've been doing?" he asked finally. "Yes," I said simply. "Does it bother you?" He shrugged, setting his phone down. "It's fine. Just be careful what you share online. You never know who's watching." The irony of him warning me about secrecy wasn't lost on me. The next morning, I received a message through my TikTok account from someone named Melanie Winters, identifying herself as a content strategist for a social media management company called Silver Voices. "We specialize in amplifying the online presence of creators over 50, she wrote. "Your content has exactly the authentic quality our clients look for. I'd love to talk about potential partnerships." I stared at the message for a long time, wondering if it was legitimate. After some research, I discovered that Silver Voices was indeed a real company, and Melanie Winters had an impressive background in digital marketing. I replied with my new email address and suggested a video call. Melanie was in her 40s, with stylish gray-streaked hair and bright eyes. "Mrs. Elliott, I'm going to be straight with you," she said after introductions. "There's a huge untapped market of viewers who want to see content from women your age. The authenticity and wisdom you bring is invaluable, and frankly, underrepresented on these platforms." "I'm just a former kindergarten teacher," I said, downplaying my growing understanding of how these platforms worked. "That's exactly why you're perfect. You're relatable, warm, and genuine. With some strategic content planning and consistent posting, we could build your following significantly. Would you be open to monetizing your content?" "Monetizing?" I repeated, the concept both foreign and suddenly intensely interesting. "You mean making money from these videos?" "Absolutely. Through brand partnerships, sponsored content, platform revenue sharing. It wouldn't happen overnight, but based on your current trajectory, I think we could get you there relatively quickly." I thought about the divorce papers in Richard's Bible, about the retirement fund he planned to split unfairly, about the future I'd thought was secure but now hung by a thread. "I'm interested," I said firmly. "Very interested." The following week was a crash course in what Melanie called content creation strategy. She helped me establish a posting schedule, suggested topics that would resonate with my growing audience, and coached me on improving my video quality with better lighting and sound. She was careful to preserve what she called my authentic voice, insisting that was my greatest asset. "People can spot fakeness a mile away," she explained, "especially your demographic. They've developed highly tuned BS detectors over their lifetimes." I laughed. "We certainly have." With Melanie's guidance, I expanded beyond TikTok to YouTube, where longer videos allowed me to dive deeper into topics. I started a series called Wisdom I Wish I'd Had, sharing life lessons I'd learned over 6 decades. Richard remained oblivious, or at least pretended to be. The divorce papers stayed in his Bible, the filing date approaching. I continued my double life, dutiful wife preparing for her golden years by day, emerging social media presence by night. My following continued to grow, surpassing 50,000 across platforms by the end of the month. Comments poured in, not just from women my age, but from younger viewers too, many expressing how they wished their own grandmothers would share their wisdom this way. "What you're doing is building a brand," Melanie explained during one of our weekly strategy calls. "Grandma Eleanor isn't just you, it's an experience, a perspective, a trusted voice." The concept was strange to me. I'd spent my life being someone's something, someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's teacher. The idea that I could be a brand standing on my own was both terrifying and exhilarating. The first brand partnership offer came 2 months after I found the divorce papers. A company that made high-quality cooking tools for people with arthritis wanted me to feature their products in my baking videos. The compensation they offered for 3 dedicated videos and several mentions was more than I'd made in a month of teaching. I signed the contract without telling Richard. The money went into my new private account, joining the funds I'd been gradually moving from our joint savings. Not enough to be noticed, but enough to give me a safety net. The night before our youngest daughter's wedding, the deadline Richard had apparently set for himself before filing the divorce papers, I lay awake beside him, watching the minutes tick by on the clock. Tomorrow, Amy would marry her college sweetheart in a beautiful ceremony we'd spent months planning. The day after, according to his timeline, Richard would end our marriage. The weight of what was coming pressed on my chest like a stone. Not because I feared losing him anymore. The man lying beside me had become a stranger, but because I dreaded the public humiliation. Our friends, our church community, our extended family, all would know that Richard had deemed me disposable after 42 years. I slipped out of bed and went downstairs to the kitchen. Without really thinking about it, I set up my phone and pressed record. "I want to talk tonight about fear," I said quietly. "Not the fear of spiders or heights or public speaking, but the deeper fears that keep us awake at night. The fear of rejection, the fear of starting over, the fear of public humiliation." I spoke for nearly 20 minutes, never mentioning Richard or our specific situation, but sharing the universal anxiety of facing the unknown. When I finished, I was surprised to find tears on my face. I almost deleted the video. It felt too raw, too honest. But after a moment's hesitation, I uploaded it instead. Amy's wedding the next day was picture perfect. She looked radiant in her gown, and her new husband gazed at her with such obvious love that it made my heart ache. Richard played his role flawlessly. The proud father walking his daughter down the aisle, delivering a touching speech at the reception, dancing with me to our song, while guests smiled approvingly. Only I knew it was all a performance. His final act as the devoted husband before the curtain fell. That night, exhausted from the wedding and the emotional weight of what I knew was coming, I checked my phone before bed. My video from the night before had exploded, garnering hundreds of thousands of views in less than 24 hours. The comment section was filled with messages of support and shared experiences. Several major content creators had shared it, amplifying its reach far beyond my usual audience. Melanie had sent an urgent text. "Call me first thing tomorrow. This is a game changer." I looked over at Richard, already asleep, and wondered if he had any idea that while he had been planning to discard me, I had been building something of my own. The call with Melanie the next morning confirmed what the analytics were showing. My vulnerable video had resonated in a way none of my previous content had. My follower count had doubled overnight. Several brands had reached out wanting to partner with me, and most significantly, a publishing agent had contacted Melanie about the possibility of a book. "This is when we scale," Melanie said, excitement evident in her voice. "Strike while the iron is hot. We need to increase your posting frequency and capitalize on this momentum." I agreed to everything she suggested, then ended the call because Richard was coming downstairs. Today was the day according to his timeline. I wondered how he would do it. Over breakfast? After dinner? Would he simply hand me the papers I'd discovered months ago and pretend it was the first time I was seeing them? "Good morning," he said, pouring himself coffee. "The wedding went well, don't you think?" "It was beautiful," I agreed. "Amy looked so happy." He nodded, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. An awkward silence fell between us, something that had never been part of our relationship until recent months. "Eleanor," he finally said, setting down his coffee cup. "We need to talk." "Here it comes," I thought. "I've been thinking a lot about our future," he continued, not meeting my eyes. "About retirement, about what comes next for us." I waited, saying nothing. He seemed to struggle with his words. "This isn't easy to say." "Then perhaps show me instead," I suggested quietly. He looked up, confusion crossing his features. "Your Bible," I said. "The papers inside it. Between Proverbs 31 and Ecclesiastes." All color drained from his face. "How long have you known?" 3 months, I answered truthfully. "Since that Sunday you went fishing with Robert?" He closed his eyes briefly. "I was going to tell you today, after the wedding, so it wouldn't spoil things for Amy." "How considerate," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "It's not what you think," he started. "Isn't it? It's not about Brenda from your office, the one you've been having dinner with when you're supposedly fishing?" His shock confirmed what I'd only suspected until that moment. Jennifer's private investigator had been thorough in his report, but I hadn't been entirely sure until I saw Richard's face. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter." I cut him off. "What matters is what happens next." He reached for my hand across the table, a gesture so familiar from our decades together, yet now feeling like a stranger's touch. I pulled away. "Eleanor, I'm sorry you found out this way. I never meant to hurt you." The absurdity of his statement almost made me laugh. "You filled out divorce papers and hid them in your Bible, Richard. You planned to end our 42-year marriage the day after our daughter's wedding. How exactly did you think that wouldn't hurt me?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "I've made arrangements. You'll be taken care of." "Will I?" I asked, thinking of the inequitable division of assets I'd seen in his papers. Like the division of our retirement fund? Or the sale of our home, those arrangements? His eyes narrowed slightly. "You've been busy." "I have," I agreed, "though perhaps not in the ways you imagine." I took out my phone and opened my analytics dashboard, sliding it across the table to him. The numbers displayed there, followers, engagement rates, video views, estimated earnings, were substantial enough to make his eyebrows rise. "What is this?" "My work," I said simply. "While you've been planning your escape with Brenda, I've been building something of my own." He scrolled through the screen, disbelief evident on his face. "This is from those cooking videos? This many people watch you bake?" "They watch me talk about life, Richard. About reinvention, about finding new purpose, about facing fears." I took the phone back. "It turns out quite a lot of people are interested in what a 63-year-old woman has to say." "I don't understand what this has to do with our situation," he said, gesturing vaguely between us. "It means I'm not the same woman you decided to discard," I told him calmly. "The Eleanor who would have been devastated by these papers, who would have begged you to reconsider, who would have been financially dependent on whatever arrangements you made, she doesn't exist anymore." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder, sliding it across to him just as he had likely planned to do with his divorce papers. "What's this?" he asked, opening it cautiously. "My counter-proposal," I said. "You'll find it's quite different from what you had in mind." Jennifer had helped me draft a divorce agreement that accurately reflected my contributions to our marriage, including the years I'd worked to put Richard through business school, the career opportunities I'd sacrificed to raise our children, and the unpaid labor I'd provided as a spouse for over 4 decades. It also included a detailed accounting of all our marital assets, including those Richard had attempted to hide. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered after scanning the documents. "These figures, you can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious," I assured him. "And I should mention that Jennifer Lockhart is prepared to take this to court if necessary. She's quite confident in our position." "Jennifer Lockhart? You've been meeting with a divorce attorney? Behind my back?" The irony of his indignation was almost comical. "Yes, Richard. Just as you've been meeting with Brenda. We all have our secrets, it seems." He pushed the folder away angrily. "I won't agree to this." "That's your choice," I said with a shrug. "But before you decide, there's something else you should consider." I reached for my phone again and pulled up the draft of a video I hadn't yet posted. In it, I told the full story of finding divorce papers in a Bible, of discovering a husband's infidelity after 4 decades of marriage, of the meticulous planning that had gone into discarding me when I was no longer useful. "I have nearly 200,000 followers across my platforms now," I explained, as his face grew increasingly pale. "This video would likely reach millions. I've been very careful not to mention you by name in any of my content so far, but this video would be different." "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I don't want to," I corrected him. "I would much prefer to handle this privately. But I need you to understand that I'm not powerless in this situation, Richard. Not anymore." The threat was clear, though I wasn't sure if I would actually follow through. Public humiliation wasn't my style. I had no desire to expose our private pain to the world. But Richard didn't know that. He only knew the dutiful, accommodating wife I'd been for 42 years, not the woman I was becoming. "I need time to think," he said finally, pushing back from the table. "Take all the time you need," I replied. "I'll be at Zoe's apartment for the next few days. You can reach me on my cell when you're ready to discuss this reasonably." I had already packed a suitcase, prepared for this moment. Our granddaughter had readily offered her spare room when I'd explained the situation weeks earlier. She'd been my most fervent supporter throughout this transformation, helping me navigate social media and cheering each milestone. Richard watched in silence as I gathered my purse and the overnight bag I'd left by the door. "What happens to us?" he asked as I reached for the doorknob. For the first time, I heard genuine regret in his voice. I turned to look at him. This man I'd loved for most of my life, this stranger I now barely recognized. "That was your decision the moment you filled out those papers?" I said gently. "I'm just ensuring I have a say in what happens next." The 3 days I spent at Zoe's apartment were among the most productive of my new career. Free from the weight of pretense, I threw myself into content creation, recording videos addressing themes of resilience, self-reliance, and personal growth. With Zoe's help, I set up a more professional recording space in her living room, complete with proper lighting and a microphone that significantly improved my audio quality. Melanie arranged virtual meetings with potential brand partners, companies targeting the growing market of active, engaged women over 50. I signed contracts for sponsored content with a skincare line formulated for mature skin, a meal delivery service specializing in heart-healthy options, and a clothing brand known for its stylish yet comfortable designs for older women. The publishing agent Melanie had mentioned reached out directly, expressing interest in a potential memoir focusing on late-life reinvention. "Your story resonates with so many women," she explained during our call. "The idea that it's never too late to rewrite your narrative is powerful at any age, but especially for women in their 60s who've often been told their most valuable years are behind them." I didn't tell her how personal this journey had become for me. That would come later, if we moved forward with the book. For now, I simply expressed interest and promised to consider her proposal. Throughout these busy days, my phone remained conspicuously silent. No calls or texts from Richard. Our children reached out, confused by my sudden absence from the family home, but I kept my explanations vague, saying only that their father and I were working through some issues and needed space. On the morning of the 4th day, as I sat at Zoe's kitchen counter reviewing analytics from my latest video, my phone finally buzzed with Richard's name. "I'd like to talk," he said, his voice subdued. "Would you be willing to meet me at Riverside Park, near the bench where we used to take the kids to feed the ducks?" The choice of location surprised me, a place filled with happy family memories. I can be there at noon, I agreed. The park was quiet for a weekday, just a few mothers with strollers and elderly couples on their daily walks. Richard was already seated on our old bench when I arrived, looking older and more tired than I remembered. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance. "Of course." We watched a family of ducks glide across the pond's surface, the silence between us less tense than it had been in our kitchen days earlier. "I've spent a lot of time thinking," he finally said. "About us, about what I've done, about your counter-proposal." I waited, letting him find his words. "I was wrong," he admitted, eyes still on the water. "Not just about Brenda, though that was certainly wrong, but about how I viewed our marriage, our partnership. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing everything as a transaction, as assets and liabilities. And I became a liability?" I prompted when he paused. He winced. "In my distorted thinking, yes. As retirement approached, I convinced myself I wanted something different. Someone different. It was selfish and cruel, and I'm deeply ashamed." His words sounded genuine, but after months of deception, I wasn't ready to accept them at face value. "I've spoken with my lawyer," he continued. "I've instructed him to withdraw the divorce papers I filed." This caught me by surprise. "You actually filed them?" "When?" "The day after I found out you knew," he admitted. "It was reactive, defensive. I thought if you knew anyway, I might as well proceed." I absorbed this information, feeling a fresh wave of hurt despite everything I'd already processed. "I've also reviewed your counter-proposal," he said. "I'll agree to it, all of it, if that's what you want." "What I want," I repeated, turning to look at him directly. "What I wanted, Richard, was the partnership we promised each other 42 years ago. What I wanted was honesty, respect, and the retirement we planned together. You took those choices away from me the moment you decided our marriage had an expiration date." He nodded, accepting my words without defense. "I understand that I've broken something precious," he said quietly, "perhaps beyond repair. But I need to ask, is there any possibility of reconciliation? Any path forward together?" The question hung between us as a pair of ducks squabbled over breadcrumbs near our feet. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately, grateful for another chance at the life I'd thought we were building. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I'm not sure I can trust you again. And more importantly, I'm not sure I want to try." He looked stricken, but nodded slowly. "I understand. The thing is, Richard," I continued, choosing my words carefully, "in trying to discard me, you actually set me free. For the first time in decades, I'm discovering who I am outside of being your wife, outside of being someone's mother or teacher. And I'm finding I quite like that person. I've seen your videos," he admitted. "All of them. You're remarkable in them. Confident, wise, engaging. It's like seeing a side of you I never knew existed. Or never bothered to notice," I suggested gently. He couldn't dispute that. "What happens now?" he asked after another long silence. "For now, I think we proceed with the legal separation as outlined in my proposal," I said. "I'll continue staying with Zoe while we sort out the house situation. My career is taking off and I need to focus on that." "And us?" I sighed, feeling the weight of 4 decades shared between us. "I can't make any promises, Richard. I'm not closing the door entirely, but I'm also not waiting by it. I have a life to build, with or without you in it." He reached tentatively for my hand. After a moment's hesitation, I allowed the contact. "For what it's worth," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm proud of what you're creating. And deeply sorry I'm not going to be the man standing beside you while you do it." We sat together a while longer, watching the ducks and the ripples on the water. 2 people who had shared a lifetime trying to figure out if we had reached the end of our story or merely the beginning of a different chapter. In the months that followed, my online presence continued to grow exponentially. The video I'd recorded the night before Amy's wedding had struck a chord that resonated far beyond my initial audience. Media outlets began reaching out for interviews, fascinated by the story of a grandmother who had become a digital influencer in her 60s. I was careful about which parts of my personal story I shared publicly. The broad strokes, discovering a passion for content creation later in life, building a following from scratch, connecting with women my age who felt invisible in mainstream media, made for compelling interviews without exposing the painful details of my marriage. Melanie negotiated an appearance on a popular morning show, where I demonstrated one of my signature recipes while chatting about my unexpected journey to digital success. What advice would you give to women your age who feel like their best years are behind them? The host asked toward the end of the segment. I'd say that's the biggest lie we're told, I answered, looking directly into the camera. That our value diminishes with age, that we become less relevant, less capable of growth and reinvention. The truth is, at 63, I know myself better than I ever have. I'm less concerned with others' approval and more focused on authentic connection. Those are strengths, not weaknesses. The segment went viral, further expanding my reach. My follower count crossed the 1 million mark across platforms, a milestone Melanie celebrated with champagne during our weekly strategy call. You've built something extraordinary in less than a year, she marveled. Do you know how rare that is? I did know. I'd done enough research by then to understand the statistical unlikelihood of my success, particularly given my age and the saturated nature of social media. But I also understood that I'd tapped into something genuine, an audience hungry for the kind of wisdom and authenticity that could only come from decades of lived experience. The book deal came together quickly after that. The proposal the agent had helped me craft, part memoir, part advice for late-life reinvention, sparked a bidding war among publishers. The advance they offered was substantial enough to ensure my financial independence, regardless of how the divorce proceedings resolved. Through all of this, Richard and I maintained a cautious, distant relationship. He had moved into an apartment near his office, giving me space to remain in our family home. The divorce was on hold while we worked through the separation agreement. Our children were confused and hurt by the situation, but I was firm in my boundaries, sharing only what I felt comfortable disclosing. Dad says he made a terrible mistake, Michael told me during one of our coffee dates. He says he'd do anything to win you back. That may be true, I acknowledged, stirring my latte. And I appreciate that he's being honest with you kids now. But this isn't just about forgiving a mistake, Michael. It's about recognizing that our relationship fundamentally changed the moment he decided I was disposable. But people can change, Mom, he insisted. Look at you. You've transformed your entire life in less than a year. I smiled at my well-meaning son. Yes, I have. And that's precisely my point. I'm not the same woman your father decided to leave. I'm not sure we fit in each other's lives anymore, even if we wanted to try. The truth was more complicated, of course. Part of me did still love Richard. 42 years of shared history doesn't simply evaporate, even after betrayal. But another part, the growing, evolving part, recognized that his actions had inadvertently given me a gift. Without the shock of those divorce papers, I might never have discovered this new chapter of my life. 6 months after our meeting in the park, Richard asked if we could meet again, this time at a restaurant we had frequented during happier times. I agreed, curious about what he wanted to discuss. He looked better than he had at the park, less haggard, more like the Richard I had known. He stood when I approached the table, pulling out my chair with the old-fashioned courtesy he had always shown. Thank you for coming, he said once we were seated. Of course. After we ordered, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it on the table between us. What's this? I asked, making no move to take it. Open it, he urged gently. Inside was a ring, not my original engagement ring, which I still wore on my right hand instead of my left these days, but something new. A sapphire surrounded by small diamonds in an antique setting. Richard, it's not what you think, he said quickly, or at least, not entirely. I'm not asking you to come back, to pretend none of this happened. I'm asking for something else entirely. He took a deep breath. I'm asking if we could start over. Not as the couple we were, but as something new. Something that recognizes who you've become, who I'm trying to become. I stared at the ring, unsure how to respond. I've been watching your journey from afar, he continued. Not just your professional success, which is remarkable, but the personal transformation. You're extraordinary, Eleanor. You always were, but now the whole world can see it too. And that's why you want me back? I asked carefully. Because others find me valuable now? He shook his head emphatically. No, because watching you bloom, even from a distance, made me realize what a fool I was to ever take you for granted. Because I've spent 6 months in therapy understanding why I was willing to throw away the greatest gift of my life for the illusion of something new. The waiter arrived with our drinks, pausing the conversation. I used the moment to collect my thoughts, to examine my own feelings. What happened with Brenda? I asked after the waiter left, a question I had deliberately avoided until now. It ended the day after our meeting in the park, he said. It should have ended much sooner. It was never about her, not really. It was about my own midlife crisis, my fear of aging, of irrelevance. I nodded, understanding that particular fear all too well. And now? I prompted. Now I'm trying to figure out who Richard Elliot is beyond the roles I've played. Husband, father, provider. Much like you've been doing, though with considerably less success and public acclaim. He smiled ruefully. The irony isn't lost on me, I admitted, that your attempt to discard me led directly to my finding greater purpose. God works in mysterious ways, he said, the phrase familiar from his years as a deacon. I glanced at the ring again, still resting in its open box between us. What exactly are you proposing, Richard? Literally. A second chance, he said simply. Not to resume our old marriage, but to see if there's a possibility of building something new, something equal, where we both continue to grow and support each other's evolution. And if I say no, then I'll accept that with as much grace as I can muster, he said. The divorce terms you proposed will stand. You'll have the financial security you deserve regardless. I closed the ring box gently, not taking it, but not rejecting it either. I need time, I said finally. This isn't a decision I can make over dinner. Of course, he agreed readily. Take all the time you need. As we finished our meal, the conversation shifted to safer topics. Our children, my upcoming book tour, his recent volunteer work with a homeless shelter. It felt almost normal, two people who knew each other well enjoying a pleasant evening. When he walked me to my car afterward, he didn't push for an answer about the ring which remained in my purse. Instead, he simply kissed my cheek and thanked me for coming. For what it's worth, he said as I unlocked my door. I'm your biggest fan, Eleanor, in every possible way. The sincerity in his voice stayed with me during the drive home. That night, I recorded a video about second chances, about when to offer them, when to accept them, and how to ensure they're genuine opportunities for growth rather than returns to old patterns. As always, I kept the personal details vague, focusing on the universal themes that resonated with my audience. The comments poured in immediately, viewers sharing their own experiences with forgiveness, reconciliation, and knowing when to walk away. The community that had formed around my content continued to amaze me, thousands of people finding connection through shared wisdom and experience. One comment in particular caught my attention. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the chance to rewrite our own stories. Not just once, but as many times as we need to throughout our lives. I sat with those words for a long time, thinking about the multiple chapters of my own story. Teacher, wife, mother, grandmother. And now, improbably, digital creator and author. Each role had shaped me, but none fully defined me. The question wasn't whether Richard deserved a second chance. The question was what story I wanted to write next, and whether he had a place in those pages. 2 weeks later, after much reflection and several long conversations with Jennifer, my children, and even Melanie, I invited Richard to meet me at our home, the home we had shared for 3 decades, raised our children in, and filled with both beautiful and painful memories. He arrived promptly, looking nervous but hopeful. I led him to the kitchen table, the same place where we had confronted the truth of his betrayal months earlier. I placed the velvet box on the table between us. I've been thinking about your proposal, I began carefully. He nodded, waiting. Before I give you my answer, I need to be completely clear about where I stand, I continued. The woman you married 42 years ago no longer exists. The woman sitting across from you now has her own career, her own platform, her own voice. That will not change, regardless of what happens between us. I wouldn't want it to change, he assured me. That's what I've been trying to tell you. I'm in awe of who you've become. My schedule is demanding, I went on. I have a book tour starting next month, brand partnerships that require travel, content creation that takes priority. I'm not available to be the wife I was before, the one who organized her life entirely around yours. I understand, he said. I'm not asking for that woman back. I'm asking for the chance to know this woman sitting across from me now, to see if we might build something different together. I studied his face, looking for any sign of insincerity. And what about you? Who are you now, Richard? Beyond the man who nearly threw away 4 decades of marriage. He considered the question seriously. I'm still figuring that out, he admitted. But I know I'm someone who recognizes his mistakes. Someone trying to be worthy of a second chance. Someone who wants to grow old beside you, supporting your dreams as you've always supported mine, even when I didn't deserve it. I opened the ring box, looking at the sapphire gleaming in the kitchen light. I can't wear this yet, I said honestly. I'm not ready for what it represents. But I am willing to try, to see if there's a way forward for us that honors who we both are now. Relief and gratitude washed over his features. That's all I'm asking for. a chance to try. There would need to be conditions, I continued. Ongoing couples therapy, complete transparency about finances and communications, a formal post-nuptial agreement that protects my new career and earnings. Yes to all of it, he agreed without hesitation. And one more thing, I added. I'd need your blessing to share our story, the full story, in my next book. Not to humiliate you, but because authenticity is the foundation of what I've built. My audience trusts me to tell the truth, even when it's difficult. This request clearly surprised him. He was quiet for a long moment, considering. If telling our story helps other women find their voice, their power, he said finally, then yes, you have my blessing. Though I doubt I'll come across as particularly heroic. Not a hero, I acknowledged, but perhaps a human being capable of growth and redemption. That's a story worth telling too. He reached across the table, palm up, an invitation. After a moment's pause, I placed my hand in his. So where do we go from here? He asked. Slowly, I answered. One day at a time. You'll stay in your apartment for now. We'll date. Actually date, like people getting to know each other again. And we'll see what happens. I can work with that, he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. I'm pretty sure I can win you over. I did it once before. For the first time in months, I laughed with genuine warmth. You certainly have your work cut out for you. I'm much pickier now than I was at 21. As you should be, he agreed. You're Grandma Eleanor now, digital influencer extraordinaire. Your standards should be exceptionally high. We spent the evening talking, really talking, in a way we hadn't in years. About my growing platform and the responsibility I felt toward my audience. About his therapy journey and the painful truths he was confronting about himself. About our children and grandchildren and how our relationship, whatever it became, would affect them. When he left that night, he didn't take the ring with him. It remained on my dresser, a possibility rather than a promise. The following week, my subscriber count across platforms hit 2 million. The notification came through during a dinner date with Richard at a new restaurant downtown. To Eleanor Elliott, he toasted, raising his glass. Digital Empress and Reinvention Extraordinaire. And to Second Acts, I added, clinking my glass against his. In careers, and maybe, just maybe, in love as well. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Those don't exist in real life. It was messier, more complicated, filled with uncertainty and careful rebuilding of broken trust. But it was authentic. And at 63, authenticity had become my North Star. My journey from kindergarten teacher to social media influencer had been unlikely enough. Perhaps a journey from betrayed wife to equal partner in a reimagined marriage wasn't so far-fetched after all. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would face it on my own terms, with my own voice, writing my own story, one video, one post, one day at a time. And if you've stayed with me through this story, if you've found something in my journey that resonates with your own, I have one small request. Our channel is so close to reaching that milestone of 1,000 subscribers, a number that means everything for small creators like us. Your subscription isn't just a click. It's a vote of confidence that these stories matter, that women like me deserve to be heard. If my story touched you in any way, please consider subscribing. With your support, we can continue bringing these emotional journeys of resilience and reinvention to light. After all, every one of us deserves the chance to rewrite our story, no matter our age. Thank you for being part of mine today.